Hey guys, Montel here, and thanks so much for tuning in to this edition of Let's Be Blunt with Montel. I am so excited by the guest that I have on today. He's a talented actor, an Emmy-nominated comedian. He's the host of a show called Glazed. It's routinely sold out live show in LA. He also co-hosts Weed Plus Grub, and he's which is an acclaimed podcast that features actresses and cannabis culture voices and actors. Mary Jane Gibson is his co-host on that. He also stars in the 420 friendly comedy shows High Tech on Prohibited and also High Guys on BuzzFeed and First High on Civilized. And today, his work has garnered over 300 million online views. Mr. Mike Glazer, thank you so much for being a part of Let's Be Blunt with Montel today, sir.
It is such a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Man, thank you so much for being here and being a part. Because, I got to tell you, I love talking to trailblazers, and that is exactly what you have been as a trailblazer, sir.
Well, I mean, that really fills my heart because I try the best I can to make work that I'm proud of, and it just seems to resonate with a lot of people all over the world. So, I guess I'm always searching for validation, but through validation, hopefully I can make the world a better place.
Well, yes, sir. Validation is good. All of us are looking for it. I'm trying my best to figure out if I'm putting on, decent enough content. And that's what we do here with Let's Be Blunt. We try to get, key, decision makers and key influencers on to talk about what needs to be discussed right now. And that is the fact that, cannabis has been one of the only almost recession-free businesses in America in the last year during this whole COVID thing. And also, I think, for those who have been consuming, it's what's kept our sense of, sensibility, right?
Yeah, I think what's actually very interesting about that, I was having a conversation 3 days ago about gatekeepers and how it feels like the gatekeepers who are in charge of not only our country, but the people who have risen to the ranks of cannabis, any industry, they're kind of all crumbling right now. And when I look at somebody like yourself, and I'm not trying to be like, oh my gosh, Montel Williams, but what I will say is I see you as not so much of a gatekeeper of the cannabis community, but somebody who has access to the industry as a whole. And so you invite people into the fold instead of exclusion. You're all about inclusion. And I think that that's really the key to a industry that isn't even federally legal yet. We don't need people in power. We need people in standing who have access, who can bring the right people into the fold. And I think it's a very big difference.
I understand you 100%, sir, and I thank you for that because that's exactly what we try to do here. I want to make sure that we have a conversation that everybody can feel comfortable participating in and understanding, even those who don't really even like cannabis, those who are kind of against it in some ways. I don't mind having a person on. Come on, let's talk about it. Maybe I can change your views. Maybe you can change me a little bit. Doubt it, but I'll hear you out. And, as I hear you out, I'll understand why you feel the way you do. And so much about cannabis is we talk about fake news. This has been now 100 years worth of fake news that has been just perpetuated by a society that really understood its value before we decided to go ahead and make money off of its prohibition. Sounds weird when I say it that way, but people don't understand. I mean, when you look back, and I hope that, anything we say, talk about, man, feel free to use in any of your skits and your acts and whatever you do. But, America doesn't want to admit the fact that this country was built on the back of cannabis.
Yes.
From day one. I'm talking, let's go all the way back to like 1590, man, when ships were coming across the ocean. People don't know that they had and carried, pounds, close to a ton of cannabis seeds, hemp seeds on the boat. Why? Because people were eating it back then because they recognized that the hemp plant created a seed that had what they thought was the highest level of protein of any seed available. So they were eating hemp porridge daily.
I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah, my friend.
What's interesting about that is that as human beings, I feel like we are a self-centered type of being. And so it's almost as if nothing existed before us, even though plants, animals, all of these things have been around before us. But the mentality of hemp was here and then we arrived is a very different way of thinking.
It's like the thought of somebody in Europe discovered America. Really?
Right.
Around here, homeboy. How did you discover something where there are already people here? But just because you didn't know about it beforehand. But when we look back in time, every sail, every rope, the word canvas comes from cannabis.
Interesting.
Every did you know that the entire Revolutionary Army was clothed in hemp fiber?
I had no idea. And now I want to bring that fashion back. Maybe not the war back, but like, let's get hemp fashion, call Virgil Abloh and let's go.
And we got to. I mean, when we stop and think about how valuable cannabis was back at the dawn of America, it's really what kept us alive. Remember, a lot of people don't remember, in 1601, 1602, you were still walking out into the woods grabbing a leaf to wipe your butt. You know? And a lot of people were walking around with a lot of hemorrhoids and a lot of other weird,
It's probably just itchy, right?
Yeah,
probably itchy all the time.
right. And so, man, why not smoke a little bit of that plant that's over there that I turn into a cloth to sleep under? And and every one of our forefathers grew it, from George Washington to Benjamin Franklin. I don't know if you know this. Do you know that when they finally this now goes back about 5 years ago, they literally scraped the pipes that was sitting on Benjamin Franklin's desk that was in the Smithsonian Institute. They scraped that pipe and realized that homeboy wasn't just smoking tobacco. Come on now. So our forefathers were really catching a buzz, and why not, man? It was hot. It was cold. You didn't have air conditioning. You didn't have heat. So it's crazy how now all of a sudden in the last 5 years, all of a sudden people think that we just invented something called CBD. It's
Right.
been around.
Right.
I mean, the medicinal value of cannabis has been extolled for well over 3,500 years. What brought you to cannabis, my friend? When was your first experience with cannabis?
I love that question. I don't want to lose the path on what you just said, because what you reminded me of was like, just to give my whole deal in a sentence, it would be education and activism through entertainment. I'm a comedian through and through. I've smoked weed since I was 13, 14 years old, sold it out of the back of a pizza shop instead of making good. I mean, you work at a pizza shop, you're going to eat pizza, get high, and make a little cash on the side, of course. Um, and so, on the tip of everything you're speaking about within propaganda, people who might not be interested in cannabis, I co-created a show with Ryan Howard called First High for Civilized. And in that show, our whole idea was to get people of all walks of life high for the first time in a safe environment, see how they feel about it, and just try and the word destigmatized is boring and gross to me, and people use it without knowing what it means, and so just trying to make it cool and normal. If you smoke weed, you smoke weed. If you don't, you don't, but leave me alone because I do. And so First High, we got a war veteran high for the first time. And now all of a sudden they're smoking every day because it helps them not only with their PTSD, but the aches and pains of their joints. We got a married couple who were married 55 years high for the first time. A lovely lady named Katie, who has cerebral palsy high for the first time. And then here's the interesting part, Montel. We made it. It blew up on YouTube. It's called First High. The company folded, and now we can't get any of the mainstream companies to use our show and continue to make more of them, because the goal would be to take a show like First High and do it in every state as it gets legal and show that it's for everybody and anybody. And the mainstream media won't touch it because it's about weed.
Well, it's even, I understand that, my friend. I mean, I've been doing Let's Be Blunt now for, I guess, Keith, we've been doing this for almost 2 years, and we got well over 120 something podcasts. And I really wanted to turn this show into basically like the Anthony Bourdain of pot, where I was going to go around the country and to literally sit down and talk to people like yourself. I'd be sitting in your living room, sitting with you outside, and we sit down and just talk about the culture, what's happening in the neighborhood, and the culture around cannabis. But nobody wants to touch it with a 10-foot pole. And there's zero reason why not. I mean, we got to remember the majority of this country, if you go back to newspapers in, let's say, 1890, and flip over to the classified ads, in the back 3 pages, there's ad after ad after ad after ad for somebody who's selling a tincture or selling cannabis straight up. So
And meanwhile, there's an ad for Coca Cola, which has real cocaine in it, and that is all over the world.
correct, correct, and yet we don't people don't understand that the prohibition of cannabis came really out of the fact that one of the biggest prohibitionists alive lost his job, and people don't know that. When you look back at Anslinger was literally one of the biggest proponents of prohibition of alcohol. And even while alcohol was prohibited, he walked around talking about the value of cannabis because it could get you a euphoria, but didn't make you violent. He was a
Interesting.
supporter. And then as soon as he lost his job because they legalized liquor, he was like, what am I going to do? Well, I think we go after that stuff them darkies use. Let's go after them. And besides, it gives us a way to put them back in jail. And bingo, bango, next thing you know, we now have a slavery tool, an
Mm,
enslavement tool, enslavement through jail. So you can go ahead and just say, because we know them darkies are going to be doing it, so we may as well lock them all up. And you look back over time, now over the course of since 1937, 80% of the people who have served time in prison for cannabis are people of color.
of course.
And we don't want to stop and recognize that, but at least the UN has now recognized that. And a lot of countries are starting to pull out of that 1962 treaty, I think it was, that banned hemp and cannabis worldwide. That was, again, a mission of Anslinger for almost 30 years. People don't know anything about what it is they're talking about when they talk about cannabis. So you're in high school, you're working in a pizza parlor, and you said,
Yeah.
hmm,
Exactly. I was just like, oh, this helps me become a better me. I like myself more when I'm high. I'm a I'm a nervous kid who swam with his shirt on all through elementary school because I didn't like my body. You know what I mean? Just a kid who was nervous and used comedy to hide from his insecurities. And then all of a sudden I start smoking weed with my friends and I'm like, "Oh, like there's more of my brain being lit up right now. I have deeper thoughts. I'm more chill. I'm just more chill." And so it became a huge part of my life very early. And then, I guess you could say that I sold it for just monetary gain. But I would also like to at least try to spin it as a way of being like, y'all, I'm trying to Johnny Appleseed my way across St. Louis, Missouri, and get more people on board with something that is helping me. And then the only time that I haven't constantly consumed with breaks because, my what's it called when you're the like when it's so it doesn't work the same way you want it to, whatever that's called. Was when I was playing hockey and I ended up being invited to play for Team USA for the roller hockey, and I was a goalie. And so I get to the Olympic Training Center, and we're taking drug tests. I'm only allowed to have Sudafed, ibuprofen, maybe, and it's the first time in my life that I had to just abstain completely from any type of cannabis at all. And it was a trip. I'll tell you what, like it's a part of me that is really important to me, and not being able to do it while playing for the Olympic team was a struggle.
I bet. Yeah, I ended up going about 20 years without doing it myself because I was in the military, and
Yeah,
drug tests throughout the entire time in the military, and so I turned away from it. But I came back to it, and unbeknownst to myself, I came back to it because I literally, before I was diagnosed with MS, I started, suffering from multiple symptoms that were all MS related that I didn't know about, and I gravitated towards cannabis over alcohol because cannabis made me feel better, and I didn't even know why. And it wasn't until I truly got diagnosed with MS that I had a doctor say to me, look, I think you'll get a lot more success with cannabis than you would with opioids because they're going to shut your liver down. And so you ought to try that. And the second I did that, I went back to cannabis and haven't looked back since. I mean, I've stayed on it, though my usage has changed throughout the last 20 years. I went for a while where I was really seeking out very high CBD products with a moderate amount of THC, not going for the biggest bang I could. But then I started not getting the same relief, so I started going after higher THC. And then literally for about a 5-year period of time, I was probably smoking the highest THC products I could find. Again, combining a little CBD with that. That brought on relief. And then, in 3 years ago, I'll tell you this in all honesty. 3 years ago, I suffered a stroke that literally almost shut me down completely. And after that, I started noticing that I was doing way better with moderate levels of THC than I am with the higher levels of THC. But in fact, higher levels of THC really, look, I tell you, before my stroke, I guarantee you there wasn't too many people on this planet I know this for a fact that could out dab me. I was when my product came out, I probably did one night alone. I did about 120 dab hits in a row, um, no problem whatsoever. And
I was about to get confident and be like, okay, let's go. And then I heard you say the word 120. I was like, oh, never mind.
yeah, no, no, dude. I'm not. Look, I could eat 2 Kiva bars in the evening and
Whew.
still be talking to you. Okay, so I mean, I literally, it's really my tolerance had gotten so high. But then after my stroke, I started noticing, man, the higher level of THC that I put in, it like it I wasn't getting the effect that I wanted. You know what I mean? Not that I'm putting it down. I'm not putting it down for other people, but it just wasn't who I wanted to be. And now I've found this nice little area where, I modulate with relatively, I take a lot of CBD during the day, but I take a very, very mild little hit of something that's, in that 21, 22 range of THC. That's enough for me, my friend. And you know what? I also lost the need to be blottoed. You know what I mean? I mean, to
Mm.
oblivious. I want to be here. I want to focus on what's going on, but also want to have a smile on my face.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I think my only time that I love to just be just high as hell is probably, watching a Marvel movie.
Yeah.
Something where you're just sitting with friends and the popcorn is mindlessly going into the mouth. Oof.
Yeah, yeah, but you're sitting back and it's going.
Yeah.
But yeah, that I would if I had going to a theater, if I could get into a theater right now, that's when I love it the most. Also, I also used to really like it. I used to sing and play in a band, so I loved performing high. I just that the higher I was, the better. You know what I mean? To me, and I think the audiences seem to respond that way also.
Absolutely. I think that like the ability to get into a flow state is a lot easier when you're already flowing.
Absolutely. You hit it. You're tapping in, I think, many more of those brain cells that we're sitting there dormant. Now all of a sudden they're excited because again, we know that our endocannabinoid system, you've got those CB1 connectors up there in that brain that are looking for THC, and boom, it lights up and says, "Hey, what's going on? How y'all doing? I haven't seen you in a while, right?" Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. So, and now with you, my friend, that you have had such a incredible story career. Let's talk a little bit about all the diversity of your career. There was a while where you were a rep for alcohol. Is that true or no?
No, I never repped alcohol, but I've had a very wild career. I guess it would be in three parts. The first part would be comedy, where I wrote for a show on HBO called Night of Too Many Stars that was nominated for an Emmy, hosted by Jon Stewart. It was beautiful because it was a show that raised money for children with autism. So I got to put my best foot forward and write for people like Paul Rudd, Chris Rock, John Oliver, Colbert, De Niro, but also we raised so much money. So it really struck a chord with me because I'm giving back while taking a little bit for myself as well. And that's the sweet spot. The second part, besides comedy, would be Glazed, which is my live show you mentioned. It'll be
That's
back after COVID. Yes, what?
is that no, that's not. She's with weed and plus grub. What do you do? You do a show with Mary Jane Gibson, right?
Yes. Yeah. So that's our podcast, Weed and Grub, with Mary Jane Gibson and I. If you listen to a past episode, I know you had her on and it was a really great one. Weed and Grub for us is about comedy, cooking culture, and calling shit out. We just get high, hang out, yap, but we also try and talk about policy, where the weed industry is headed, educate people in a broad sense on what's going on in the weed world without getting too in the weeds about the minutia that makes people want to fucking fall asleep.
That's
Yeah, and the beauty of that we're really proud of is it just got into South by Southwest for 2021, and the cool thing is it's part of the track at South by Southwest that's called Changing the Landscape of Entertainment. So the idea that they're seeing us as people who are on the forefront of cannabis while also being in the entertainment industry is it's a real huge cosign.
That's great. So again, there's a comedy was the first tier. What was the second tier?
I would say it would be comedy, cannabis, and cooking now because I retired from hockey. On the cooking side, I feel like you and I probably have a lot in common when it comes to playing to win. Um, in the cooking side, I was on a Food Network show called Worst Cooks in America, and I got third place. Anne Burrell eliminated me. She's a celebrity chef on Food Network.
Right.
Yeah, and I got so mad that I got third place that I came back to LA, saved up my money, and went to culinary school because I was like, I should have won that fucking show. That should have been my $10,000. I'll show all of you. Fuck this. And then I get my culinary degree, and a week later, I get hired because I'm an improviser too. I get hired to work back behind the scenes on a Gordon Ramsay show on CBS. So I went from worst cook in America to being like a line cook who's a comedian on Gordon Ramsay show, and he's looking over my shoulder while I'm making 50 filet mignons perfectly medium rare, and I was like, that's a win. I told you. I told you.
You ain't kidding. That's a win, my friend. And let's talk a little bit about that idea of cannabis and food. Do you infuse some of your products, your food products, with cannabis?
Yeah, we actually, Mary Jane and I do a lot of recipe development for places like Satori. There's something really great about a controlled low dose edible or cooking for me. 2 milligrams, 4 milligrams, nothing that's going to knock you out. But I got to tell you, my other favorite thing that's happening right now is just pairing weed with a beautiful meal because the terpenes, like that minty, that lemony, that funky, any of that, then I can control how high I'm going to get as I'm getting high while just eating delicious food. So I'm also a big advocate of just smoking a joint and eating some nachos.
Absolutely, absolutely. A lot of people haven't caught on yet, but I think it's going to start catching on around the country even more. You look at this last election, my friend. You look at the election. I think everybody's got to admit that weed was the winner. Forget about who actually won, but we had 5 new states come aboard and pass legislation, and I think they're talking about for the next election maybe another 4 or 5. So I mean, we're getting close to the finish line. Will we ever reach it? What do you think?
No, absolutely not. It's a mess right now. I'm going to be straight up. Like when Kamala during her VP debate said weed will be federal, I dropped my coffee and it shattered on the floor because I was like, holy cow, I can't believe in a debate, not only did she look to camera, say the word cannabis, but then she said legalization. And I was blown away. And I think it could happen sometime late this year, early next year. But the weed industry, in my opinion, is such a mess right now because we don't have everybody wants to be a leader, so nobody is being able to be led. And so it's fractured as fuck.
I,
And
I,
until things settle and we have people in place who are speaking for the plant and for the industry and for the right reasons, we're going to continue to cannibalize ourselves while industry and consumerism and capitalism just take it over.
Could not be better said, my brother. I'm telling you, I agree with you 100%. I think one of the biggest problems right now is that we've gotten so caught up in the B to B
Mm.
and forgot about the B to C, the consumer. And, unfortunately, you've got so many of these businesses that are out here. First off, that you hit it, they cannibalize themselves by coming in and trying to buy up 5 and 10 and 15 dispensaries and trying to clone them into their own variation of themselves, not recognizing what the consumer needs, not even thinking about it. You take a look, I've been involved in this movement now for 20 years. Long before this became a gold rush or a green rush, it was back in 2001 when a doctor said to me, I think you should get off those opioids and start using cannabis. Then I started my advocacy. And back then, man, I'm telling you, people left me out there dangling. I was out there dangling by myself. One of the only celebrities that actually spoke out said, yes, I do actually consume. And I consume every day. What do you think of that? And
Mm.
the industry kind of left me behind in a sense that, I didn't get a lot of support from a lot of people in Hollywood at all. And then, back in 2010, 11, I flew to Israel, sat down in the laboratory with Dr. Meshulam, one of the leaders and thought leaders in the entire industry. This guy who actually discovered THC, CBD, and was one of the co-discoverers of the endocannabinoid system. I got a chance to sit down and interview him in his laboratory, one of the first people who actually did that. And, I was shocked at the fact that finally, about 5 years ago, everybody starts jumping on board. But the people who jumped on board literally we're just kind of opening up the door for those greedy fucks who 10 years ago said that weed was bad.
Right.
Now all of a sudden they change their mind because they think they can see money. And you said that Kamala Harris made the statement that yes, cannabis will be legalized, but let's remember that during her tenure as the AG, more people were arrested in California than anywhere else in the country.
100%.
And let's also remember that her running mate, who is now the president-elect, who will be sworn in tomorrow, 6 months ago said that cannabis was a gateway drug. The words
100%.
came out of his mouth. So what good's it going to do us to, and they weren't talking about legalizing, they were talking about decriminalizing. Excuse me, let's understand and pick up Webster's and look up the definition of decriminalize. That doesn't mean that they don't think you're a criminal. That means they just think you're less of a criminal. Excuse me? Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well said.
We need more people like yourself out here, man, talking and speaking. Let's talk a little bit about your Glades show, which I understand is sold out every single. You do it once a month, once a week.
Yeah, once a month up until COVID, and it'll be back as soon as we get COVID under control.
Under control. Are you doing anything online with it?
No, I think it is a show that is about community and bringing people together. And maybe you felt this when you were doing your talk show quite a few times, but you can feel the swirl of the audience, of your guests, and you can really feel the energy in a room, and it's electric. And I'm not about to go from having people like Dave Chappelle, Jerry Seinfeld, Tiffany Haddish drop in on my show in a live setting and then ask them to Zoom with me. I don't have the fucking balls to be like, hey, do you want to stop in and Zoom with me instead of sing Radiohead's Creep in front of all of these people while we're all high as hell with a live band? Yeah, that's a live. It's a live vibe.
Yeah, I gotta tell you, I found out the hard way. I did a speech, last month, and I won't say the hard way, but I mean, I did a speech before. I think it was well over 500-600 people, all virtual, and it's the weirdest thing in the world, man. Because I mean, you're sitting there looking at that little box of you. You don't get to see the 500 people. And you don't get that feedback that you really generally love from having a live audience that's right there. Especially
100%.
Yeah.
So just to give a little background on Glazed, living in LA, I'm surrounded by the most talented artists in a million different areas that I can imagine. Dance, street art, music, comedy. And I've been raised to give as much of myself to bring the most people together. And for me, cannabis is more about community than anything else. It's about passing that joint with friends and making new friends through that joint as well. So yeah, please.
No, I was just saying, now, do you think, I've asked this question a couple of times in the last couple of podcasts I've done, what do you think COVID's impact has been on that whole social system when it comes to cannabis? I was talking to Redman and he was saying, now he stopped passing the joint. He brings extra weed in his pocket. He'll hand you yours. You roll it yourself, smoke yours. He smokes his. But that's becoming one of those things. I mean, I talked to lots of people who say, I miss the social aspects of sitting down with a friend. Now I sit down with a friend. We don't pass a pipe back and forth. I give him a little bit. He puts it in his pipe. I got in my pipe. We sit here and we may smoke together the same thing, but we're not passing back and forth. And was a big part of, I think, what made the weed experience so good is, sharing a joint, rolling back, blowing, giving a hot one to somebody, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Doing that. What do you think? Is that going to come back? Because I think a lot of people have really backed up a little bit and said, no, I'm not going to share the joint with you. I'll give you one, but I'm not going to share it.
My favorite was when I held it too long because I got too wrapped up in telling a story. And then everybody's like, yo, you got to pass that. You can't just keep holding it.
Yeah. But I mean, what do you think? Do you think that time of passing is going to come back?
Yeah, I think it's dead. I think it's gone. And that's okay because if you can still sit next to somebody during a sunset and have that sunset, then let's make it about the sunset. But the idea that things are going to go back to normal in any way, COVID is going to be around and certainly lingering in our brains for so long. So the idea of passing a joint back and forth with friends, if everybody gets tested like we did when we went to a cabin at Big Bear for Halloween, we took a bunch of mushrooms, we all got tested, it came back negative, and we just passed joints and hung out. if we can do that safely, well, then I'm going to get tested all the time to make sure I can do that safely with my friends because I care about them. But the idea of sitting in the parking lot of Target and just chopping it up and passing a joint back and forth, unfortunately, that's gone forever.
Yeah, I think so. And I think even just, inviting 5 or 6 people over tonight without getting that pre-test, chopping it up and passing it is gone forever now, I think also because I think and it should be in a sense that, we've got to recognize we got COVID right now. And COVID is already starting to mutate into variants. Who knows what next winter is going to bring?
Yeah, I think something that's really interesting, though, is the medical community's ability to adjust to something like this and doing a lot more at home work. I'm learning about stocks right now, and there's a stock called Teladoc. And Teladoc is like, why the fuck do I need to go to the doctor for you to look at the rash on my arm? Let me just hold my arm up and you tell me if I need to come in. Let's do it. So I do think that there could be a day when our homes are built with things like COVID tests on the outside of the door, just like a doorbell. And then we have that quick, instant ability to feel safe when somebody is entering our bubble. And to me, that is an exciting step forward in how we interact as humans.
Absolutely. Well, I think there's that old saying, if you build it, they will come. If you take a look back at some of the old futuristic movies, we had this kind of technology built in the houses where you can walk over and put your eyes on something and boom, it tells you whether or not you're sick or not. So, I mean, it may start happening. That's iridology with your eyes and your irises, but I have a feeling that that's going to be something that's coming down the pike. And I think the companies that get there, the technology that gets there the quickest is the winner.
Absolutely.
So look, my friend, I got to pay some bills for a second, real quick. I take a little break, and then we'll come back, and I want to chop it up some more and talk a little bit more about how you're doing. But let's talk a little bit. Let's take a break and talk about the need for more cannabis to kind of quell this social unrest in this damn country. I mean, all right, let me take a little break. I'm on right now. You're listening to Let's Be Blunt with Montel. My guest today is Mr. Mike Glazer. He's a talented actor, an Emmy and nominated comedian, and host of Glaze. We'll be back right after this. Hey guys, Montel here, and thanks so much for tuning in to this edition of Let's Be Blunt with Montel. Today's guest is a talented actor. He's an Emmy-nominated comedian. He's host of his own show called Glazed, which is routinely sold out right now live in California. We're of course not during the pandemic, but as soon as the pandemic is over, he's going to have you back in, taking a look. He's also the host, and he also co-hosts Weed and Grub, an acclaimed podcast. Actress and cannabis culture voice Mary Jane Gibson. He also stars in the 420 friendly comedy shows High Tech on Prohibited, High Guys on BuzzFeed, and First High on Civilized. And to date, his work has garnered him over 300 million views online. My man has worked with everybody from Chris Rock to Jon Stewart to Robert De Niro, Sarah Silverman, Paul Rudd, James Marsden, and many, many more, including Montel Williams now. Ha ha. Okay. He is the one and only Mr. Mike Glazer. How you doing, sir? Thanks so much for being a part of the show today.
Thank you so much, Montel. This is amazing.
Oh man, I mean, look, I tell you what, I'm here. I'm gonna do the selfless, the shameless little plug. But look, I had Redman on recently, and I and Redman were talking about the fact that maybe we ought to do a movie together and flip the script in that movie and make me that weird character like an uncle that comes back that he's got to straighten out. If you're sitting around one evening and you're thinking to yourself, I ain't got nothing to do. What's that thing Montel was talking about? If you come up with any ideas, give me a ring, my friend.
You got it. I'm happy to start writing as soon as we finish this up. Let's go.
Man, I'm telling you, I can throw some ideas at you. I'll reach out to you. Let's chop it up for an afternoon. I'll break out my vape pen and we'll sit back and toss some ideas back and forth.
This is how it starts, right? You just start hanging and talking. Next thing you know, you got a script and you're on set and you're making something fun.
Absolutely. And I think right now, that's what we are in need of, man. I'm spending so much time, I'm sitting around watching Netflix, and I'm about to go on a Netflix moratorium, man, unless I tune in to just comedy. And, because I keep, you go through the channel guide on Netflix and look at the guide, and you see an actor or an actress, oh, wow, I like them. They're probably going to be good. You turn on their movie or you turn on their show, and it's the most depressing thing you've watched in the last 5 years. I'm shocked by this. Are you?
Yeah, everything's bad and it's not getting better. I'm like, it just feels like a background static to distract me from life. And I'm not absorbing anything. And the things that I am absorbing are things that I've seen before. Like I can't watch Great British Bake Off one more time because I'm going to be embarrassed that I know so much about these people.
Well, the same. I mean, it's like for me, I put on. I'm not going to disparage any individual actor or actress, but there's an actress that my wife likes her. We've thought about her. She's been in good stuff. So I said, let's put on this movie. Watch. I was like, got to the end of it. I was like, why did I watch that? And then 2 days later, there's another one that she's in. It's a series. Okay, let me watch this. Holy moly! How much more depressing can I get? And I'm starting to figure out. It's like, why is it okay for every one of these Netflix series to have every main character be a drunk? I mean, if you put them on, man, I swear to you, it kind of just baffles my mind. Everybody comes home. They were at church, come home from church. First thing to do is they fill up a glass with 3 shots of some sort of brown liquor and they belt it down. I don't know people who do that. Maybe I'm too secluded or too, hunkered down in my own place. I don't know anybody who can sit back and kick back a fifth of Johnny Walker on a Sunday morning. Every
Yeah.
not just one, but every Sunday morning. It's like it's part of their life. Why is that okay? And we can't have them come home and fire up a joint.
Well, it's because alcohol is faceless, which makes it for everybody. And cannabis has been using propaganda, people, and lies to put a face on it, and that face is evil. So I don't know who owns Jim Beam. Is it a dude whose name is Jim Beam? Maybe. I doubt it. Alcohol has the ability, and this is what cannabis needs to do, unfortunately, but cannabis needs to be that blank for everyone, or it needs to be so dialed in and specific. But right now, it's in this middle ground where there's faces and names and people and stats and science, and it's all this mishmash without any clear, direct path. Alcohol, it gets you fucked up. You can mix it with pineapple, it's delicious, and you can hang out. Boom, that's it. Cannabis, there's medical, there's recreational, there's state legislation, there's all these things. And until those things settle, and we have a clearly defined idea of how to brand this plant, it's going to be a mess.
Absolutely, absolutely. I agree with you 100%. And we're still again, majority of people are hunkered down. I mean, I live in an apartment building down here that every now and then I'll walk down the hallway and I go, something wafting out of somebody's room. Interesting. But and I say every now and then because clearly that person probably took a step out to go throw their garbage out, recognized that it was coming out of their apartment. So they put the towels and all that stuff down so we don't smell it anymore. But it's like I don't understand why we are still so hidden. So many people who are using. We know that cannabis use is up during this pandemic. We know that deliveries are up during this pandemic. There are more people who are answering polls saying that they have shifted from alcohol use to cannabis use, but they're doing it silently. And I don't know what it's going to take to get more and more people to speak out and tell the government, yeah, I do it. What you going to do about it?
Mhm. Well, I think two things. One is I'm not going to really slam alcohol because I will say for COVID especially, I definitely got lost in the sauce for a few months. When your purpose is taken away as a human being, there's nothing else to do but just knock back that Tito's and say, well, let's see if we can get through tomorrow. So I've been there. But the thing is that cannabis is if mainstream culture can embrace cannabis, like growing up listening to Redman, Method Man, Snoop, Seth Rogen, they're just fucking cool. They're cool. You're cool. And so the idea that you can make cannabis cool is going to go so far. And we need people in different industries than hip hop, comedy to step up to the plate in culture and make it cool for that demographic. We have Martha Stewart, who's opening up CBD shops all over the country. Great. She is cool to so many people. And if we can continue to make cannabis cool in different areas of culture that people resonate with, the rest will work itself out, I believe.
Yeah, and I mean, but I think it goes back to what you were saying. It's like, your show, First High. I mean, there's no reason why that show isn't on the air, especially in every single state that has some form of legal cannabis. There's no reason why it's not on the air. You can't be seen. It can't be seen because it just again get rid of the term destigmatize, but it takes that edge off from up
Hmm.
above. And yet we can't seem to convince the industry that gets the highest of any industry in America to accept what it does.
Right. But that's because they haven't figured out how to make money from it yet.
Right.
I feel like when I think that like people like maybe Monsanto or pharmaceutical companies or something are trying to trademark terpenes right now so that
Right.
they can just like own different parts of the plant. And these are the steps that are getting people in the cannabis industry irate because they don't have the access or the ability or the government connections to take care of themselves for that. And they're scared they're going to get squeezed out. And they're going to get squeezed out. But and once the government figures out on a national level, not just state to state, but national level, how to make the most money from this, I think that that is when I don't want to say the word normal, or average. I think that's when more Americans will get on board because it's scary to do something new in your life when your life is short. And so if you can make money from it and profit from it and give back from it, then you're in a sweet spot where it's a part of your recreational day or medical day instead of uh, people need to make money from it and they need to know that it's possible to make money from it for them to get on board. I think is really what I'm saying.
But I think that's part of that. That's where I blame our industry a little bit because our industry doesn't spend the time and hear me out when I say this. When I say educating the masses about the viability and the value of this as a substance. I mean, we spend so much time trying to come up with brand new names and try to trick the consumer who is already as a consumer coming in the store to buy a different, cultivar or a different strain. But we don't spend the time going out to. Though I spoke to a person here in the last couple of days who's spending some time now going to nursing homes in Florida and sitting down and having conversations. Some of them virtually, and some of them face to face in places that they can do it face to face, where they're just teaching people and say, it's like the industry got caught up in trying to figure out how to produce the highest high rather than recognizing that, there's a whole generation out here called baby boomers who grew up in the culture of cannabis didn't have a bad thought about it. They made some of them didn't do it back then when they were kids. Some of them did do it back then when they were kids, and recognize that hey, I've been successful, and now I'm in the twilight years of my life. Why shouldn't I be doing it now? And we haven't tried to convince them that it's okay. And I think that's where this industry is really falling short on itself. It's got to spend more time. I say B2C,
Yeah.
business to the consumer, providing the consumer with the information that they need to know and understand. And there's breakthroughs every day. And you're right. You can get, I'm caught up here with Let's Be Blunt a little bit, ensuring that I give my audience some of the most up to date research information and trying to make sure that I educate them to understand that there's nothing wrong with this. And like you were saying, I mean, go back 3 years ago, nobody was even talking terpenes 4 years ago. Now all of a
Hmm.
sudden we're starting to recognize that the entire plant, the flavonoids, the terpenes, some of the phytocannabinoids and others have just as much impact on your experience as those two cannabinoids that we know the most, which is CBD and THC. Well, come on now, there's CBG, CBN, CBD. There's a variant of every one of those. There's an acid version of every one of those. All of those have play and say in what your experience is going to be. And then when you put the terpenes on top of that, and let's say you mix two cultivars together so that you have a different expression of one particular, terpene, you may change your entire experience with cannabis. And
You
we,
know what you're making me think of? I'm sorry to interrupt, but do you remember that cartoon, I'm Just a Bill on Capitol Hill?
yes, there you
We
go.
need that. We need the educational cartoon, I'm Just a Bill on Capitol Hill for cannabis, something that is sticky, that can get people all on the same page about what's going on.
Absolutely, absolutely. There you go. That's another one of those things you can write in the corner one night where you're just chilling. No, but absolutely, friend, we definitely need that. That's that way. It's that catchy little tune that's being sung by grandma.
There you go. Exactly. I'll remember in first high when I got that army veteran was nice enough to get high for the first time with me, and he held that joint, and we sat there in silent for what felt like longer than 30 seconds, and it was just a moment of settle. And he goes, "Man, if I knew what this would feel like right now, I would have been doing this for 20 years. Damn." And he was just caught up in the stigma, and for him it was religious, and there was a lot of barriers in between him and trying it for the first time. And then as soon as he did, you could just see his whole body change. Everything about his demeanor just went, "Oh, okay, I see what this is."
Yep. Well, that's. I think that's how a lot of people, come out of their very first experience. Yeah, maybe 10% of people have, what might be, a deleterious kind of experience, but that's maybe only because, again, they rolled into a dispensary and bought something that they shouldn't have bought. They had a bud tender who was telling them, "Oh, this is just mild." Yeah, right, homeboy. That's because you've been smoking 25 days out of the month. This person's smoking the first joint in their life. Don't give them something that you think is mild. Give them something that's really mild. But but the majority of people have that same type of experience that you just explained.
Yeah, my first time I just ate a whole box of Cheez-Its, watched a movie with my friends, and I was like, "I'm on board with this."
Yep, yep. I remember my first time. I think it was with one of my bandmates, and I went out and during a break we were playing. I played in a band back when I was in high school, and I remember because they would go out every single night to get in that band, and they get high. I knew they were getting high, but I never did. They said, "Come on out here with us this time." I went out. So then I went, "Wow, I could have been a part of this entire time." Holy moly! Went back in and probably performed the best that I've ever performed that night. That night, you know what I
That's
mean?
awesome. Heck
Absolutely.
yes.
And so now again, right now we are in the middle of quarantine. So are you able to do any of your shows like any of the 420 friendly shows like High Tech or how about the High Guy? Are you doing any of those?
No, well, hi guys. With what I'm really focused on right now, I've been fortunate enough to write for some big TV networks this past at the end of last year, leading into this year. And because I decided to quarantine with my podcast co host, Mary Jane Gibson, we were able to continue the podcast, never missing a Wednesday. They drop on Wednesdays. And so Weed and Grub has really become this beautiful full time job, even though we have other full time jobs where we got to host huge virtual cannabis events. We've had amazing guests on every single Wednesday. We'd love for you to come on, please, sometime.
Cool.
And then South by Southwest invited us to be a part of their festival this coming time. And so I think the lesson in that I've taken away from COVID is if you're excited about something enough that you want to keep doing it, lean in twice, three times, four times as hard and see where it can take you. Because now Mary Jane and I are working with great sponsors. We have a great fan base that we've gotten jobs in the cannabis industry. We have people reaching out to us saying, "What do you know about Delta 8?" And I'm like, "I don't know anything about Delta 8. So let's buy some Delta 8 and try it on the podcast and see what happens next." So between our fan base, our love for each other and the community and the podcast itself, and then helping people get jobs or join Normal and create charities that raise money for cannabis, it's really been COVID in that way has been such a blessing because the podcast is really we're hoping that it continues to change the space.
I hope so too. Because I wish you the best of luck, my friend. Because I think the more and more, people open up to your podcast, they'll open up to mine. But they'll also the experience then gets broadened and gets amplified. It gets amplified. Then it becomes like you were saying, normal in a sense, but it just becomes a part of our culture, which it should have been all along.
All along, all along. Well said. I feel like that's the soundbite. Goddamn.
Well, no, I tell you something though, my friend. If Reggie and I are sitting back right now, we're gonna get together. He's been a little under the weather, but he's getting better. And as soon as he pops that back up, we're gonna sit down and start, chopping it up and throwing out some ideas. But Reggie calls me Uncle Monty. So he goes, "Hey, Uncle, what's up, Uncle?" I said, dude, we ought to do a movie together where I'm that uncle that you just can't get rid of. You know what I mean? And you got to straighten him out. He was like, wow, let's flip the paradigm. That would be pretty cool. So yeah, I'd love to hear what you think about that.
I love that idea. I mean, you're making me think about John Witherspoon, to be honest, because like, movies like Friday where he just pops in, spraying the can all over the bathroom and he's like, don't nobody go in there for 25, 45 minutes. Yes, I think the more we're talking, the more I'm like, I think he could be a great weird uncle. Yeah. Okay.
Oh yeah, no, I'd love to be that weird guy. I thought about it. I played military characters, which is all part of what people assume I would be. I played the real straight laced guy, but I think I would love to, and I've done some comedic things before in the past. So I'd love to flip that switch and give people something they haven't seen before. Anything else going on that you want to know about? What else is new? What's coming down the pipe?
You know what? This year, besides Weed and Grub, we've got a lot of shows that we're ready to pitch if people don't mind working in a cannabis idea. We have one idea. I'll say it right here. I'm not too scared. I hope people don't steal it, but maybe they will. But during quarantine, we did a live stream of tiny hot plate concerts where we took an NPR Tiny Desk concert and we crossed it with cooking a delicious meal on a hot plate. So we made one where we were making a flight of tacos, breakfast tacos, shrimp tacos, all on a hot plate, while our dear friend Harry Mack freestyle rapped over all of it. And we were like, I think there's something here. Music, food, culture, it's a vibe. And so we were trying to take it out to networks and say, we will cook a dish on a hot plate while incredible musicians, comedians, artists, storytellers, poets do what they do best. And that would be the show. It just brings together all types of entertainment. And it's called Tiny Hot Plate Concert, THC. So, let's get high while we do it. And every single network was like, we love that idea. None of our advertisers are going to get on board with that. And I was like, fuck you, truck companies. Get it together. What are we talking about? So we'll see what happens next with it, but that's where it's at.
I swear, maybe you just ought to do it online and screw those advertisers for right now and do it. And then next thing you know, they'll be chomping at the bit, banging on your door, trying to see if they can become a part of it.
I love the leverage of that because then I'll be like, well, looks like we have even more asks now that you want it.
Correct. Absolutely. That's, I think that's what we're going to end up all having to do though. I think, going back to that comment that I was making earlier, not to disparage alcohol, but, you know, any series right now where the star comes home and fires up a joint and sits down on the couch and doesn't have a conversation about it, but that's clear what they're doing. What's the problem?
Yeah.
That's what a lot of other people are doing right now. That's what probably 60% of this country is doing every single day.
And I think that's the biggest problem in the cannabis industry, if I'm going to be frank, is you're a real ass dude. And you're a real ass dude who obviously loves the plant. But I think it's you as a person that people resonate with, not the plant itself. And I think to really change the opinion and culture, we have to focus on people. The plant is super important, but if there's not a personal story attached to it, if we don't focus on people, then it's never going to hit the heart and the ears. And so hanging out with you and being like, this is a human being who loves what he's doing and is fighting the good fight. But it's about you and what you're doing for it and not the other way around. And it's really important.
I agree with you, my friend. Thank you so much. I can't say thank you enough, Mike, for being a part of the show today. I mean, honestly, anytime you have anything you want to drop, anytime you want to talk or just sit down and chop it up a little bit, man, you're invited back. I'd love to have you back on again. And I will take you up on that idea of coming on to Weed and Grub. I'd love to do that too. Maybe we can, I fancy myself. I'll tell you something very interesting about me. A lot of people don't know. As a kid, I was really weird. I was one of the strange kids. I literally was, an athlete for my ninth and 10th grade year. Then I became a musician, but I was also a student government geek. So I was the president of my class my junior year, my senior year. I was a student on the board of education my senior year. First kid, actually assigned to the board of education in Anne Arundel County in Maryland back then. I was also a member of the state student council and the regional student councils. So I was like, I had three brain cells battling with each other all the time inside my head. Plus, I was catching a buzz. And I also, in the band that I had, we would go, let's say we do a 2-week stint in Ocean City, Maryland. Well, while we were there, we'd be playing in a nightclub. So during the day, I'd have all day off. So I went over and became a sous chef and a cook. So I would cook during the day to make some extra money. I was too young to get in any place. I actually played in nightclubs I had to come in the back door of because I was too young to walk in the front door. They wouldn't let me walk in the front door. So, I became this little novice cook. I do all the cooking at home right now for my wife. I'm the one who cooks dinner every single day. Matter as soon as we're done, I'm gonna go get ready to do a good pressure cooker meal. So maybe sometime we ought to get together, do a weed and grub, and I'll set up a camera and we can or set up the computer and I'll cook a meal and I'll follow you guys cooking a meal.
We'll both cook something at the same time, same recipe, so that we can all eat together while we're chopping it up.
There you go. And I got to tell you something, man. Do you have a pressure cooker?
I don't, but Mary Jane does. So technically, yes.
My brother, I'm telling you something. There was a time, 10, 15 years ago, lots of people use pressure cookers. I actually had my own brand pressure cooker that I was selling for a while, and it's available online. You can find one or two of them left over. But I had my own pressure cooker, my own brand, and it's become the fallback cooking tool at least once a week. Once a week, I'm like, yeah, like today, I'm doing 3 podcasts. So in between this one and the next one, I will go in there and get the pressure cooker started. It's one of those things that you just literally put together your parts, dump them in at the same time, season the way you want, put the lid on it, hit the button, walk away. 15 minutes later, you got a meal.
Ooh, that sounds great.
I've ventured out. I'm cooking everything from fish to steak to chicken to you name it. I cook it in there.
That's what's up. I want a Montel Williams pressure cooker now. Let's go.
I'll see if I can find you one and make sure we send you one, my friend. You stay well. Look, and again, like I said, anytime you want back on the show, let me know. And I wish you the best of luck. I want to make sure if people want to catch you, get more information. Where do they go?
Well, they can watch our Netflix movie coming out, Uncle Monty and Redman, in 2022. Otherwise,
I'm Mike Glazer.
Otherwise, you can catch me on Instagram and Twitter at GlazerBooHooHoo, and every Wednesday with Weed and Grub with Mary Jane Gibson. It's a podcast we drop every single Wednesday, and you should check them out.
We definitely will. I want to make sure everybody does that. Make sure you follow up, keep in touch, and keep track of what Mike Glazer is doing. He is a trendsetter for sure, and actually one of the guys that's going to make, I think, one of the most difference in this entire industry over the next couple of years. So thank you so much for what you do. Love having you. Make sure you tune in to the next Let's Be Blunt with Montel. Thanks for joining me on Let's Be Blunt with Montel. Please make sure you're subscribed and hit the bell to be notified when new episodes post each week. We'd love to hear your feedback also, so please send us your comments.